When Behavior addressed gameplay pain points during one of their community streams, they tackled the topic of slugging, the act of leaving a survivor in the dying state on the ground for an extended period of time, by pointing out how survivors playing on the Gideon meat plant were subject to the longest dirt naps, and that they were trying to implement a system that tackled this point of frustration for survivor players. And understandably so. Survivors don't want to be sitting on the ground at the behest of the killer for 4 minutes until they bleed out and do basically nothing, because it just feels like a waste of their time. And while there are bad actors who will always seek to abuse a system that's available to them, there are two fundamental misunderstandings here. First of all, the definition of slugging that Behavior seems to abide by lacks a crucial addendum. Slugging is the act of leaving a survivor on the ground for an extended period of time with no intent of picking them up to hook them. There are several scenarios where a killer would rather break a pallet or reload their weapon or kick a nearby generator before attempting to hook a survivor, simply because taking the extra action happens to be the most ergonomic option. In these scenarios, the survivor is not being slugged because the killer still fully intends on returning to them after a brief detour. Downing the survivor, doing a little task, picking them up, and then moving them to a better hook is far more efficient than picking up the survivor immediately, moving them to the closest hook, and then clearing a task. When the killers have to thrive off of efficiency, these little actions aren't personal agendas, but rather little time-saving measures that add up over the course of the trial. The suggested anti-slugging changes in the 9.2.0 and 9.3.0's PTB wouldn't have you believe that though, as there was no grace period for the anti-slugging mechanic that would automatically kick in at 90 or 120 conglomerate seconds across the entire trial. Even if you were doing these little tasks that are very crucial to general efficiency for killers, it would still add to that conglomerate count. This mechanic also didn't account for the second misunderstanding, that killers can't pick up survivors that are in positions where they can be saved easily. The most common location, of course, being under a pallet when another survivor is clearly nearby, necessitating that the killer chases them off before they can pick up the first person. This happened to me during my lockpicking leopard video, where I was downed under a pallet outside of this house on Haddonfield. The killer couldn't pick me up because everyone else was hovering around them, trying to save me, and we lost a lot of momentum because the killer was allowed to make the decision to chase my team off and get a bunch of injuries before she could pick me up. I was on the ground for a solid 70 seconds, not because I was getting intentionally slugged, but because of my and my team's positioning. Now extend Haddonfield and its moderate amount of pallets to the Gideon meat plant and its large swaths of pallets. Suddenly, it makes sense that the reason why killers slug on this map more often is because survivors are often afforded more opportunities to get pallet stuns, which the killer can't let happen. It might seem redundant and reductive for me to spell it out this way, and I'm spelling it out to especially highlight how simple concepts and data points are constantly misinterpreted by Behavior and then used as a justification for changes that are so myopic you'd swear that Bubbles from Trailer Park Boys had made them. The most frustrating drawback of Behavior's data misinterpretation is how often it ends up restricting and punishing creativity in the player base. The root cause for why something is done or used heavily in this game is rarely considered, and instead of making a qualitative change to facilitate the reason, Behavior makes a quick and shoddy quantitative one. This isn't groundbreaking information to anyone who has been playing the game since its inception. As someone who has been playing consistently since 2023, there are a number of changes that Behavior have made within the last 2 years that make no sense unless you believe they approach said changes from a standpoint of misinterpreted data. Barbecue and chili, Hex Thrill of the Hunt, Distressing, No One Left Behind, and some other perks in here that I'm kind of forgetting. These perks all used to do a similar thing, and that was that they increased the amount of blood points that you got per match. Blood points are an extremely crucial component of Dead by Daylight's progression system, as I'm sure you're all well aware, as much as I'm sure that you're also aware that it takes roughly 1 million blood points to get one prestige level on any one character. Puffalope recently made a video where he wanted to see how long it would take him to reach the 5 million blood point cap as a survivor player while solo queuing with only the escape cake offering to his name. After making every reasonable effort in every game to maximize his blood point gains, it took him just over 10 hours to reach the milestone. That's 2 hours per prestige level. Most people, myself included, want to get Prestige 3 on their characters so that they have all the perks available at their maximum level, which then equates to 6 hours for 3 million blood points. There are 90 characters in this game between Killer and Survivor, 41 Killers and 49 Survivors, meaning that if you were playing at maximum efficiency, it would hypothetically take you 540 hours to get all the perks unlocked, and this number will only go up with each new character that's added. When it comes to grinding for games, I've seen worse. I've played League of Legends, but Dead by Daylight is also not a free-to-play game. Not only do you spend $20 on the base game, but without Steam sales, you can spend upwards of $200 to purchase all of the DLC packs to unlock every character in the game. Even when you unlock the character for a specific set of perks, you don't get anything to help progress those characters. And I understand that the more veteran players of the game will say that 1,000 hours isn't that many, but I need you to understand that 500 hours even of any video game is a lot for employed individuals or people who enjoy other video games, especially after they have to justify the hefty price tag. When there are perks that help reduce that count of 500 plus hours of mindless grinding, of course those are going to be picked to help with the aimless grind that you're faced with presently. Behavior's data saw that people were using these perks to aid the time you had to spend on grinding the game, and so they removed that. Not a single perk grants you extra blood points anymore, as of the 8.4.0 patch. Granted, they did severely reduce how much grinding you had to do in 6.1.0, but we've had more than 3 years worth of content added since that patch. The argument there is that behavior needs player retention, but how well are you able to retain players when they get burnt out of their options so quickly? If you want to run a collection of perks for a build but haven't put prestige into that character or this character, then it's pretty easy to get to a point of frustration and not want to continue trying. I can even imagine that there are many of you out there who have seen my builds for killers on this channel and haven't been able to replicate exactly what I played because of this restriction. And that sucks, because the build variety is one of the things that makes Dead by Daylight fun. This might sound tangential, but from my understanding, there are 3 reasons why people like 2v8 and why it keeps getting extended every time it's introduced. 1, it gives players a chance to try some of the licensed DLC characters that they might not have unlocked because of the price tag. 2, the lack of build requirement and general chaos of the mode suited employed players far better, as they didn't have to worry about the strong perks or meta strategies from either side. 3, and possibly the most important, the game mode always came with a massive bonus to blood point gains on the survivor side. Since everything was accelerated in this mode, the relative time spent to blood points gained was astronomical. And the same thing happened with the Blood Moon event in April, and will no doubt happen again with the winter event this year. Even if player retention is the goal here, the accelerated gains from event queues might only knock off 100 hours or so of playtime. You still have dedicated individuals wrapped into a financial commitment of 400 hours instead of 5. Oh, the humanity. Where will Behavior's stocks of potential whales go now? To other games that don't disrespect their time and money as poorly, probably. So to wrap it all around to the perks that had this functionality removed, Behavior has the completely wrong idea as to why they were widely used in the first place, and didn't do enough to compensate. Whether this change was made off of stats or not, it feels malicious because the initial effect itself was innocuous anyway. I don't think a single person was out here complaining about distressing, except for maybe people who hated playing against the doctor, and if people brought this perk, they were probably trying to get more blood points. What's the harm in that? That people will play your game less? They already are with the recent lack of bug fixes. I mean, look, there are 90 characters in this game now, and I think that every single one of them should start at Prestige 1 when you unlock them. Share the perks with every other character on their side of the roster, but still hold the incentive for people to level them up to their maximum potential. According to our Puffalo model, this would knock the grind for all 90 characters from 540 hours to 360. You would only spend 15 full 24-hour days of your waking livelihood trying to get every killer and survivor to Prestige 3 instead of 22 and a half. If you were to argue that not everyone unlocks every character, anyone who doesn't want to unlock all 90 characters probably isn't the dedicated player that Behavior was looking for anyway. The dedicated players do still get targeted though, as there were a few patches within the last year that attempted to bring some head-scratching changes to the Artist, the Knight, and the Cenobite. The Artist, despite her great lineup of skins, has always had a low pick rate overall thanks to the hidden complexity of her power. Lower pick rates means higher concentrations of players either trying her out for the first time and deciding that she isn't their playstyle, or players that have dedicated tons of hours to perfecting her playstyle, with very few people in between. Genuinely, I think that many people regard the artist highly because they've seen people like Carnivorous pull off insane cross-map snipes, but nobody actually wants to play her, and nobody understands that she might be rated a little bit too highly. I could go on a tangential piece about underpicked killers and why you don't see them, but that's probably a topic for another video. During the Springtrap PTB in May of this year, the artist received a handful of suggested nerfs to her add-ons that would have made getting decent results with her far more difficult. The misinterpretation there being that the artist probably has a high kill rate, which obviously necessitates making even fewer people play her by making her less of an appealing option. During the Walking Dead PTB, Behavior yet again lashed out at another killer, the Knight. Now, I hate the Knight as much as the next person, both to play as and against, but I can't sit here and pretend like his counterplay is difficult. If he's setting the power down while in a loop, hold W away from him. If the jailer is chasing you, tap a window with your body because it'll force the power to go to the window before it continues its chase. I have relatively very few hours on Survivor, and in my Copycat Challenge video, I held my own in chases against the killer, even with the limited knowledge that I have. With that in mind, Behavior went ahead and tried to nerf him into oblivion anyway. The Knight is not a high-tier killer, and these changes do not help his case. Then, again, during the 9.3.0 PTB in November, Behavior thought it would be a good idea to remove the ability to land Cenobite chains on players that had the Endurance status effect. This was done in an effort to remove his ability to use the original Pain add-on as a way to instantly remove Endurance from an unhooked survivor, but do you know how many fucking things give survivors Endurance now? When a survivor is unhooked, they have Endurance for 15 seconds buffed from the previous 10. Off the record extends its duration for yourself out to 40 seconds, borrowed time increases this for your unhooked target to 27 seconds, made for this 10 seconds after completing a heal, or We're Gonna Live Forever 10 seconds after picking somebody off of the ground. This, of course, doesn't include the infamous Den Hard, which survivors found out you could use to parry Cenobite chains. The Cenobite was removed from the DBD store in April. Now, anybody who purchased the DLC prior to the cutoff date still has access to the killer, but the number of Cenobite players prior to his delisting was already fairly low, and I can't imagine that many players see him nowadays, which makes it especially odd for Behavior to go out of their way to target a killer that very few people can or do choose to play. My only guess is, yet again, that his high kill rate contributed to this change. The real problem with these three killers isn't that they're particularly good. It's more that they aren't seen very often and have uniquely complex kits, meaning that most players don't know the proper counterplay. Going slightly off topic here, but when Skull Merchant received a set of nerfs that blew her legs off at the knees, there were people who continued disconnecting against her for months. Hell, to go even further off topic, I have seen so many people in various streamer chats ask how the streamer has colored scratch marks, even though it was discussed in the developer stream in October, highlighted in several videos about the PTB, and written into the live patch notes as an accessibility feature. What I'm saying is that the problem rests on this player base not knowing how to read or how to play the game, or knowing where to access basic information even about the title that they're playing. If we can't trust players to read patch notes, then we sure as hell aren't going to be getting much better results on them reading through every killer's power and understanding the counterplay. The end result is that the killers with lower play rates will end up having higher kill rates due to their unique kits. The quantitative solution from Behavior is to just throw nerf hammers at these unique killers, but the proper solution would be giving the player base more information on the killers they can face. A demonstration of their powers to test out in a custom game or something like that. Will players read through and engage with this information? Probably not, but it will at least be a definitive place to help people learn more about the game so that they aren't frustrated by powers that they don't understand. You know which killers haven't received changes in literal years though, despite being constantly touted as the best killers in the game? The Blight and the Nurse. Yes, the last time the Blight was nerfed outside of buffing his terror radius to 40 meters and reworking several of his add-ons was in May of 2021. Over 4.5 years ago, Blight's churn radius while dashing was nerfed, and that is the last time that this killer was touched. The Nurse had her last major change in 6.5.0, February of 2023. Since then, she has been pretty much the exact same as she is now. I can't speak to exact balancing, so correct me if this sounds terrible, but I think both of the killers should suffer the full cooldown of all of their charges regardless of how many charges they use. That, or we at least have to make Blight a 110% killer so that he actually needs to use his power in chase. Oh, Deathslinger can't be 115% in chase because he'd be too oppressive. My sibling in Satan, Dracula, has a teleport and can hit people through upright pallets with his hellfire. More killers need to be 110%. Another point of data that behavior seems to misinterpret quite frequently is how they approach balancing various perks. This is a bit of a contentious one even to this date, so I'm not going to make suggestions on what they should change now, but there is a pattern here and I want to show it to you. In 2024, we did have a pretty good run where a lot of patches made great attempts at buffing various underutilized and weak perks, bringing some of them up to mid-tier or even high-tier viability. Some of the buffs like Background Player or Hex Throw of the Hunt were a little overzealous, and so they were understandably tapped back down shortly afterwards. Back in 6.7.0, Dead Hard was nerfed to the state that we know it for presently, still sitting pretty as one of the most picked perks in the game. In 7.7.0, Decisive Strike was buffed to 5 seconds from 3, then nerfed to 4 seconds in 8.1.0. 8.0.0, Pop Goes the Weasel was nerfed from 30% current generator progress to 20%, alongside Grim Embrace, which saw its base duration decrease by 2 seconds, and Scourge Hook Pain Res, which dropped from 25% to 20%. Notably, these perk changes don't include other high pick rate favorites like Sprint Burst, Window's Opportunity, Lethal Pursuer, and Bamboozle. As a killer main, I absolutely hate facing people with Window's Opportunity because all that these people do is run to the nearest glowing yellow object at the earliest sign of inconvenience. The fun part of Dead by Daylight is the chase and punishing mistakes and using my power correctly. It's not fun to pursue somebody who doesn't want to even engage in chase to begin with because they're already running down the yellow brick road halfway across the map. As a Survivor player, on my soul, I hate playing against Lethal Pursuer. Part of the ability to engage in chase is finding a survivor through context clues and putting together the general spawn logic, while simultaneously hoping that the survivor isn't playing stealthily enough to avoid detection. If the survivor plays their cards right in the early game, they might be able to get away in time and buy time for their team as a result. Now, I don't mind Barbecue and Chili or even Nowhere to Hide as much, because those are two perks that are clearly associated with an action, and most killers make it pretty plainly obvious that they have those perks. Lethal Pursuer, on the other hand, you get free information for starting the game unless someone's running Distortion. Now, here's the commonality between the perks that have been, shall we say, more aggressively focused on as of late. All of them are disruptive to the natural game plan. Dead Hard disrupts the killer's ability to down survivors regularly. Decisive Strike disrupts their ability to pick somebody up after they have been unhooked. Pain Resonance, Grim Embrace, and Pop Goes the Weasel are disruptors to generator completion. The perks that aren't disruptive to this flow of gameplay, at least not directly, despite their high pick rates, are things like Sprint Burst, Window's Opportunity, Finesse, Lethal Pursuer, Bamboozle, and Nowhere to Hide. I'm not opposed to perks being strong on either side, since general strength also means that there are often underrated options to sift through. Dying Light has become one of my favorite passive slowdown perks that rewards me for hooking survivors, and it pairs neatly with a few different builds. What I am opposed to is behavior misunderstanding why perks have high pick rates in the first place. People put perks into their builds commonly because they are strong tools, they address weaknesses or flaws in the gameplay, and they accelerate their own game plan. Survivors like running exhaustion perks because it wastes the killer's time more easily and more efficiently than any other tool in the game. Even in my lockpicking leopard video, I brought Sprint Burst because of how efficient that perk is, even though it had nothing to do with the build. Killers like using generator regression perks because it buys them more time to do things on the map, and it's especially necessary for new players who might need that time to give themselves more experience on the killer's power. I also believe that the high occurrence rate of strong perks comes from this game's incessant grind and ridiculous hidden price tag, as I discussed earlier. Players have to make a distinction between which perks they have the money and time to unlock. Unless they want a specific character, any reasonable individual will gravitate towards unlocking ones that give them the best perks for the best results. Therefore, you are more likely to see Scourge Hook Pain Resonance and Window's Opportunity at all levels of play because they are generally the most cost-efficient perks in the game. Nobody is going out of their way to unlock Hattie and the Dredge because their perks are pretty niche and terrible. Pop quiz, what are the adept perks for these two characters? I'm not accepting that answer because you cheated. Almost nobody plays these characters. The final point that I want to touch on is the palette density quality of life update. I've already made my thoughts on this subject pretty clear in this video, and it's already been undone, but now the new variation just made things worse. How are we going to increase the density of every palette and then go out of our way to make the filler tiles themselves unplayable for survivors? Never mind the survivors, how am I supposed to feel rewarded for playing the game as a killer when every tile is a low-walled 50-50 palette? I mean, sure, it makes playing low tiers significantly easier, but there's no challenge, there's no nuance or capitalizing on slight mistakes or winning mind games against your opponents when we try to reinvent the wheel like this. You want to know what a sweet spot was? Well, we had before Behavior tried messing around with this. Behavior stated that they wanted this change to reduce dead zones, locations where pallets didn't spawn on maps. And sure, if you're looking to curb some of the bad RNG that this game can give you, I can understand that. In application though, there shouldn't have been 3 filler pallets leading into the shack, and then a pallet dead zone on the other side of the map anyway. My guess here is that Behavior wanted to give survivors more pallets to use against killers with higher kill rates or ones that rested higher on a tier list. Thing is, those that have high kill rates or high tier list placements receive those accolades because they are able to avoid pallets and because the survivor doesn't know the counterplay. The Lich has remained one of the higher kill rate killers because of his dour complexity from the survivor side, and that partially includes how he interacts with pallets. Any of the S to high A tier killers are generally rated highly because of their ability to avoid pallets. This change, no matter which way they push the needle, does less in the way of impacting lower tiers compared to what it does for the higher tiers, and is an ultimate display of Behavior misinterpreting their game's data. So from failed attempts at addressing the tunneling and slugging grievances, to choosing to axe high pick rate perks over more subtly problematic ones, to making palette updates that nobody asked for, it genuinely feels like Behavior does not understand their game, nor the context of the data that they collect. Going forwards, I would like to see Behavior actually engage with their consultants program, if it even still exists, so that they can get proper perspectives from people who play the game. Thanks for listening to me ramble for a little while. That's all I got. Safe travels, and goodbye.